The alien king decreed his daughters must marry a human. The outcome surprised everyone. The Karun Empire had always been feared across the galaxy. Tall, scaled, and imposing, the Karun were proud of their long lives and powerful traditions. Their warriors had conquered countless star systems, and no outsider had ever entered their royal courts without trembling. Yet today, the entire empire was in shock. King Vaelthar, ruler of the Karun, had called the Grand Court together, and what he announced would change everything. "By my decree," the king's deep voice echoed through the hall, "my daughters will each marry a human." The chamber went silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if a dam had broken, shouts and murmurs filled the air. Nobles banged their fists on tables. Some turned pale, others whispered with disbelief, their eyes darting at one another. Humans, the short-lived, fragile species that the Karun had always considered inferior. How could the king expect the empire to accept such a union? The king did not flinch at the uproar. His scaled hands rested on the podium as he continued. "I have studied the humans for decades. They are not the strongest. They do not have the longest lives. But I have seen them survive where others fall. I have seen them fight impossible odds and still protect each other. Their resilience is unmatched. Their loyalty is unmatched. The future of the Karun Empire depends on alliances of strength, and I see strength in these humans." A murmur of disbelief swept the court. The nobles had expected political marriages to other powerful alien species, alliances that would expand their influence and protect the empire. No one had expected humans. No one had imagined the king would choose those who had always been considered outsiders, even weaklings, to join the royal bloodline. Among those who listened in stunned silence were the king's daughters. The eldest, Princess Silira, had always been proud, ambitious, and dutiful. She straightened her back and fixed her gaze on her father, her golden eyes burning with confusion and anger. How could he dare humiliate them in front of the entire court? The second daughter, Vinci, was curious. Her head tilted slightly, as though trying to understand the strange logic behind the decree. The youngest, Coronix, shivered at the thought of leaving the familiar palace walls and being bound to someone she had never met, someone human. The king raised his hand, silencing the murmurs. "You will each have time to meet the humans. You will judge them not by strength, but by character. They are not perfect. They are not flawless, but they are adaptable, brave, and capable of love. These qualities will serve the empire better than any fleet or army." The announcement spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Across human space, many were skeptical. How could humans, considered weak by alien standards, be worthy of marrying princesses from the Karun Empire? Volunteers came forward nonetheless, humans who had proven themselves in wars, exploration, or acts of heroism. They were ordinary humans, chosen not for titles or wealth, but for courage and character. Captain Elias Ward was among them. He had been a soldier who had lost his entire unit in a fierce border war, yet he had survived. Calm under pressure and skilled in leadership, he was selected to meet the eldest princess, Silira. Dr. Nalan Reyes, a human engineer known for solving impossible problems under fire, would be paired with Vinci. The youngest, Coronix, would meet Jonah Hale, a quiet rescue pilot whose bravery had saved countless lives in humanitarian missions. The humans arrived in the capital under heavy guard. The palace, built on a towering cliff that overlooked a vast purple ocean, shimmered in alien sunlight. Its spires reached high into the sky, and its walls were adorned with carvings that told the empire's history. The humans marveled at the scale of it, all but remained composed. They knew that the nobles were watching closely, ready to find fault in every move. Silira, meeting Elias for the first time, stared at him with a mix of anger and disbelief. He did not bow in fear or grovel in respect. Instead, he looked her directly in the eyes, calm and steady. "I am here to serve, not to conquer," he said simply. She narrowed her eyes. He seemed ordinary, fragile even, but there was a quiet confidence in his posture that made her hesitate. Vinci's first encounter with Nalan was different. He laughed freely when she asked him a question she thought was serious. He was open, honest, and unafraid of speaking plainly to a princess. At first, she thought him reckless, but she quickly realized there was a sharpness to his mind. He noticed things others did not, and he adapted instantly to unexpected situations. Coronix, meeting Jonah, felt the most fear. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper, but there was strength in his voice that made her stop trembling. He carried himself with care and patience, moving as if he feared harming anything, yet she sensed he could act decisively in danger. The first days were tense. The humans were scrutinized at every turn. They had to navigate strange customs, alien diets, and formal ceremonies designed to test obedience and loyalty. Every misstep would be used as proof of their weakness. Yet they did not falter. They observed, adapted, and learned. They treated the princesses as equals, respecting their opinions while demonstrating competence. Slowly, the princesses began to notice something that no Karun male had ever shown. Humans were not only brave, they were empathetic. They listened, they helped without being asked, and they never acted from pride or fear. The turning point came unexpectedly. A sabotage attempt struck the palace. Explosions shook the spires, alarms rang, and the nobles panicked. Guards were injured, servants screamed. The humans acted immediately. Elias shielded Celira from falling debris without hesitation. Nalan used broken tools and engineering knowledge to stabilize a collapsing support beam, saving dozens of lives. Jonah carried injured palace workers through smoke and fire, moving with speed and precision. The princesses, seeing this, could not help but admire them. They had expected weakness, but they saw courage. They had expected failure, but they saw effectiveness and care. The nobles, however, were speechless. They had always believed strength was measured in power and fear. The humans showed them something different: strength in action, calm in crisis, and loyalty that could not be bought or demanded. The royal court began to murmur differently. Words of caution turned into admiration. Some nobles, reluctant to admit it, began to respect the humans. They were proving themselves in ways that no one had anticipated. Celira, who had felt anger at her father's decree, began to wonder if there was wisdom in it. Vinci's curiosity deepened into interest, and Coronix's fear began to change into cautious hope. King Vaelthar observed all of this from his throne. His scaled face showed nothing, but his eyes glimmered with satisfaction. He had made a decision that challenged centuries of tradition, and already the humans were proving its worth. The daughters were beginning to see the value in these outsiders. Perhaps, in time, the empire itself would come to understand. For the humans, the days were not easy. Every step was watched, every action analyzed. One mistake could ruin everything, yet they were determined. Elias, Nalan, and Jonah were not here to impress. They were here to prove that humans could be more than the galaxy expected. And in doing so, they were beginning to win over the most skeptical observers, the princesses themselves. By the end of the first week, the palace was quiet for the first time in days. The humans were no longer treated as jokes or potential failures. They were acknowledged as partners in survival and intelligence. The princesses, too, were beginning to see them as more than strangers. They were seeing potential companions, allies, and protectors. The galaxy watched and waited. Whispers spread to neighboring systems. What would become of the Karun Empire if the king's daughters truly married humans? Could such unions bring strength or ruin? The nobles debated endlessly, but one fact was becoming clear. Humans, underestimated and overlooked for centuries, had arrived in the heart of the Karun Empire, and their presence alone was already changing everything. In quiet moments, Celira watched Elias practice drills with palace guards. She noticed how he encouraged the young soldiers, never mocking, never boasting. She saw him take responsibility for mistakes, including those that were not his own. Vinci observed Nalan working alongside engineers, repairing complex systems while explaining everything patiently to curious onlookers. Coronix followed Jonah as he quietly moved through corridors, helping injured staff, checking every corner for danger. In these small acts, the princesses began to understand why their father had made the decree. Humans were not simply strong in body. They were strong in ways the Karun had never valued. By the end of the first part of their journey together, no one could deny that the king's choice was bold. The humans were surviving, adapting, and earning respect. The princesses, though still wary, were beginning to see them in a new light. And King Vaelthar knew that the true test was yet to come. If humans could thrive in the palace under scrutiny, if they could prove themselves in the challenges ahead, they might just change the course of the entire empire. The first step had been taken. The humans had arrived. The princesses had begun to question what they thought they knew. And the Karun Empire, proud and unyielding, was about to witness something it had never imagined. The subtle but unstoppable rise of humanity in the heart of their world the days after the humans arrived were unlike anything the Karun Palace had ever experienced. The nobles had expected chaos, embarrassment, or outright failure. Instead, they saw humans moving with calm purpose, speaking with respect yet never fear, and earning the quiet attention of the princesses. Each day, the gap between alien traditions and human practicality grew more noticeable, and the palace itself seemed to shift in subtle ways. Celira watched Elias closely. At first, she had resisted him, angry that her father had imposed a human upon her. She had imagined him stumbling over customs, making mistakes, or offending the court with his blunt manners. Yet Elias moved among the palace guards and servants with quiet confidence. He listened when others spoke, but when he spoke, his words carried clarity and authority. He did not demand respect, he earned it. That morning, an unusual alarm rang through the palace. Sensors had detected unusual movement near the outer walls, and panic spread quickly. Nobles ran to the windows, shouting commands. Celira, however, followed Elias as he moved toward the disturbance. Without hesitation, he assessed the situation, directing guards with precise instructions. Form 2 lines along the eastern flank, check the perimeter and report back. No one engages until I say. Celira felt her anger and doubt waver. She had never seen a Karun male command soldiers with such calm authority. Elias did not shout or boast. He acted decisively, and the soldiers responded immediately. For the first time, she saw that strength could come in forms other than scale, armor, and fear. Meanwhile, Vinci was learning from Nalan. The engineers had discovered that a small maintenance system feeding the palace's power grid had begun to fail. If left unattended, it could cause minor chaos across several sections. While the Karun engineers argued over protocol and hierarchy, Nalan walked into the chamber, inspected the panels, and began fixing them without hesitation. He explained each step to the curious onlookers, showing them the importance of precision and flexibility. Vinci watched him for a long moment, her curiosity turning into admiration. He did not have the raw combat strength of Karun warriors, yet he solved problems quickly, calmly, and efficiently. More than that, he listened. He answered questions patiently, never dismissing anyone's concerns, even when they were repetitive or foolish. There was a kind of quiet power in this, one that the princess had never encountered in the strict and prideful Karun hierarchy. Koronix, the youngest, was walking beside Jonah. He moved softly, almost invisibly, through the palace corridors, checking for anything that might threaten the residents. When a minor gas leak was detected in the kitchen, Jonah immediately helped the staff evacuate and sealed the area while the palace engineers struggled with the alarms. Koronix realized that bravery did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered, and that whisper could save lives. Despite these positive impressions, not everyone in the palace welcomed the humans. Some nobles remained bitter, plotting quietly against them. They whispered that the king had lost his mind and that the princesses were being tainted by outsiders. Some even suggested sabotage or secret tests to expose the humans' weakness. Their words were venomous, but the humans ignored them, focusing on action rather than politics. A week later, the humans were given a more formal test. The king arranged a simulated crisis, designed to judge how the humans would respond to extreme stress while protecting the princesses and palace staff. A section of the palace was rigged with simulated hazards, from collapsing platforms to energy field malfunctions. Guards were instructed to act as if injured, and the princesses were placed at strategic points, ostensibly vulnerable. Elias, Nalan, and Jonah treated it as a real emergency. Elias coordinated rescue teams, issuing orders that balanced efficiency and safety. Nalan repaired critical systems, using improvised tools when the palace equipment failed. Jonah carried injured participants out of danger zones, refusing to let even the smallest staff member be harmed. The princesses followed, learning how the humans thought and acted in ways that the palace had never taught them. When the exercise ended, the palace was in awe. The humans had succeeded in every task. They had moved calmly, solved problems instantly, and ensured that everyone, including the princesses, remained safe. For many of the nobles, it was an uncomfortable revelation. Strength and intelligence were often measured in intimidation and formal titles, but the humans had demonstrated that courage, problem-solving, and loyalty were far more powerful. That evening, the princesses were left alone with the humans in a quiet garden, a place of pale blue trees and sparkling pools that reflected the alien sky. Scifi, still guarded, approached Elias first. "You did well today," she said, her voice betraying a hint of genuine respect. Elias nodded. "I am here to serve and protect. That is what I can do best." Scifi studied him. She saw that he did not seek praise. He did not crave recognition. Instead, he acted because it was the right thing to do. Slowly, she felt a spark of trust, something she had never expected to feel toward a human. Vinci turned to Nalan. "Why do you not worry about the nobles watching you?" she asked. Nalan smiled faintly. "Worrying does not solve problems. Action does. I focus on what can be done, not what might be said." Vinci tilted her head, realizing that she had spent her entire life following rules, worrying about appearances and protocol. Nalan acted freely, yet effectively. His courage and intelligence combined in ways the Karun system could never teach. Koronix watched Jonah sit quietly by a fountain, observing the water ripple under the alien moonlight. "Do you ever feel afraid?" she asked softly. Jonah looked at her, his eyes calm. "Fear is natural, but fear should not control action. You move forward despite it." Koronix felt something shift inside her. She had been timid and cautious for her whole life, but Jonah's quiet courage showed her a new kind of strength, one that was patient, careful, and yet unshakable. The nights were long in the palace. Whispers from the nobles, both approving and condemning, filled the corridors. Yet the princesses began to see the humans differently. They were no longer simply outsiders or obligations of a royal decree. They were partners, individuals who acted with intelligence, empathy, and courage. Slowly, the princesses began to trust them, even admire them, though none admitted it aloud. The humans, for their part, did not attempt to force closeness. They understood the delicate balance of court life and the heavy expectations placed on the princesses. Instead, they acted consistently with integrity and skill. Every small act, rescuing an injured servant, solving a complex problem, protecting a princess from harm, built quiet bridges of trust. One afternoon, a minor crisis erupted outside the palace walls. A rogue ship, unregistered and aggressive, approached the Karun capital. It fired warning blasts, causing panic among civilian vessels nearby. The palace military prepared to respond, but the humans were already coordinating. Elias organized a rapid response fleet, pairing Karun pilots with human strategies he had learned in past wars. Nalan worked to stabilize communication systems that had been damaged by the rogue ship's attacks. Jonah coordinated rescue operations for civilian vessels in danger. The engagement was short but intense. Using quick human-inspired tactics, the Karun fleet was able to force the rogue ship to retreat without civilian casualties. The palace staff and nobility were stunned. Humans had not only survived another challenge, they had led it to success. After the engagement, King Vailthar spoke privately with his daughters. "Do you see now?" he asked. "Strength is not only in size or age. The humans have something the Karun have long ignored. They can adapt, they can bond, and they can inspire loyalty. These qualities will shape the Empire's future far more than fear alone." Scifi remained thoughtful, her pride still present but tempered with new understanding. Vinci's curiosity had turned into respect, and Koronix's fear had softened into quiet confidence. The king's words had not only validated the humans, they had begun to change the princesses themselves. By the end of the second week, a subtle transformation was taking place in the palace. Guards moved more smoothly, engineers shared knowledge more freely, and even the nobles who had been skeptical began to notice the humans' influence. Though some continued to resist, many were quietly impressed. The humans were teaching through action, not command. They were showing a form of strength that was different from the Karun way, yet equally effective. For the princesses, this period was more than observation. It was a revelation. They had never imagined that humans could possess such courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Each day brought new lessons, small and large, that challenged their preconceptions. Scifi began to trust Elia's judgment. Vinci started seeking Nalan's advice for engineering and logistical problems. Koronix even began shadowing Jonah, learning his methods of careful observation and quick action. In quiet moments, the princesses discussed the humans among themselves, cautiously sharing their impressions. "I thought he would fail," Scifi admitted about Elias, "but he surprised me. He leads without needing to dominate." Vinci nodded. "Nalan explains, but he also acts. He does not wait for permission. He solves problems. I have never seen that among our engineers. Koronix spoke softly, almost in wonder. Jonah does not rush, yet everything he does is precise. He saves lives without needing recognition. Their words reflected a truth that the Karun court had not yet accepted. Humans were extraordinary, but not in the ways the Empire expected. They did not dominate through force or fear. They excelled through adaptation, cooperation, and courage, qualities that even the proudest Karun could admire but rarely practiced. And so, by the end of the second part of this story, the humans had survived their first major tests, earned the respect of the princesses, and quietly begun to reshape the palace itself. The Karun Empire, once rigid and unyielding, was beginning to see the value of outsiders. The stage was set for greater challenges, deeper bonds, and conflicts that would test both human and Karun in ways no one yet imagined. For now, one truth was clear. The king's bold decree had set the wheels of change in motion, and humans, underestimated and overlooked for centuries, were proving their worth in the heart of the empire. The calm that had settled over the palace after the humans' first successes did not last long. Among the Karun nobles, anger and fear had grown like a storm behind closed doors. Many whispered that the king's decree had humiliated the empire and endangered its future. They had tolerated the humans so far, expecting mistakes, weakness, or failure. But the humans' consistent skill, courage, and quiet authority had made them an uncomfortable symbol of a new kind of strength. One evening, as the sky glowed with the deep purple of the Karun twilight, a secret council of nobles met in the palace's lower chambers. Their voices were low but sharp with resentment. "The humans are not what they seem," one noble hissed. "They move too fast, think too clearly, and earn loyalty that should be ours. If this continues, the king will ruin the empire." Another noble, his scales glinting in the dim light, added, "The princesses are already trusting them. Do you not see? This is not a temporary mistake. It is a change we cannot allow." Plans were whispered, agreements made. The nobles would strike not in open battle but with precision. They would create chaos inside the palace and frame the humans as the cause of failure. If the humans faltered even once, the king's decree could be overturned and the humans would be banished, or worse. Meanwhile, the humans continued their daily routines, unaware of the plotting. Ilias trained with the palace guards, teaching techniques that combined human tactics with Karun discipline. Nalan moved among engineers, repairing systems and explaining solutions to complex problems. Jonah accompanied palace medics and rescue teams, practicing evacuation drills and improving safety protocols. Their calm presence and competence had become a source of inspiration, not only to the princesses, but to many palace staff. The princesses had begun to admire and respect the humans openly, though still with caution. Celira watched Ilias with a mixture of pride and curiosity. His ability to take command without arrogance amazed her. Vinci observed Nalan and found herself impressed by his ingenuity, patience, and willingness to teach. Koronix followed Jonah quietly, learning the art of careful observation and swift action. Each human had begun to influence their respective princess, showing strengths that Karun culture had never valued. But the palace would soon face a test unlike any the humans had yet encountered. The rebellion began subtly. Systems were tampered with in ways that looked like accidents. Communications were disrupted. Alarms malfunctioned. At first, the humans believed these were minor errors, the result of aging equipment or routine mistakes. But when a section of the palace's defensive grid failed during a routine security check, causing minor injuries to palace staff, the pattern became clear. Someone inside was working against them. Ilias immediately began investigating. He questioned guards, analyzed security logs, and walked the palace walls himself, searching for signs of sabotage. Nalan studied the damaged systems, repairing them while tracing the source of the interference. Jonah assisted in moving the injured to safe areas and inspecting sections that were at risk. Celira, seeing the humans' calm efficiency, felt something stir within her. She realized that her anger toward the humans had faded, replaced by trust and admiration. Yet she also felt fear that the palace she had always known might fall into the hands of those who wished to destroy it. The first open attack came on the third day. A group of rogue palace guards, loyal to the rebellious nobles, attempted to seize control of the armory. They intended to hold it until they could overwhelm the human defenders and force the king's daughters to comply with their demands. Elias was the first to respond. He coordinated the loyal guards and organized a defense plan that used the palace's layout to their advantage. "Do not charge blindly," he instructed. "Move strategically, protect civilians first, and block escape routes for the attackers." Celira followed him, moving with him into the corridors. She had never imagined herself fighting alongside a human, yet she found that she trusted his judgment. Vinci and Koronix each joined their humans, ready to defend not only the palace, but also the ideals their father had instilled. The rebels were fierce, but they were predictable. They relied on brute force, expecting fear to spread through the defenders. Instead, they met calm, coordinated action. Nolan used knowledge of the palace systems to trap the rebels in corridors without causing permanent harm, while Jonah led injured or frightened guards to safety. Elias directed counterattacks, anticipating the rebels' movements and preventing any collapse of defense. By the end of the day, the attackers were captured. There were no deaths among the palace defenders, and the humans had proven themselves again. But the event had consequences. The princesses realized that the rebellion was larger than anyone had anticipated. This was no minor disturbance. It was an attempt to overthrow the king's authority and undo his decree. In the quiet aftermath, Celira stood beside Elias, watching the captured rebels being escorted away. "You acted like a commander," she said softly. I have never seen anyone do that, not even among the Karun warriors." Elias shook his head. "I am no warrior of your people. I am human, but humans fight differently. We adapt, we protect. That is how we survive." Vinci approached Nalan, her expression thoughtful. "You were calm even when the systems failed," she said. "How do you do it?" Nalan smiled faintly. "Panic solves nothing. Focus does. Action matters more than fear." Koronix found Jonah quietly inspecting the safety of corridors. "I never realized that moving carefully could be so powerful," she said. Jonah looked at her calmly. "Strength is not always about speed or size. Sometimes it is about seeing what others overlook and acting before it is too late." The princesses spoke in hushed tones that night. Their opinions of humans had changed dramatically. What had begun as resentment and suspicion had evolved into respect, admiration, and cautious trust. They understood now that humans were strong in ways the Karun Empire had long ignored. But the rebellion was not finished. The captured nobles were only a part of the larger scheme. Intelligence soon revealed that several other houses were preparing fleets to surround the capital, intending to force submission or attack when the humans were least prepared. The threat was massive, far larger than any individual human could face alone. King Vaelthar convened an emergency council. His daughters stood with the humans, who were now trusted advisors, though still outsiders in the eyes of most nobles. "The Empire will face a trial," the king said. "If we fail, centuries of stability may collapse, but I have seen what humans can do. They think differently, act differently, and inspire loyalty in ways we do not always understand. I place my trust in them." The humans, for their part, prepared meticulously. Elias worked with palace security to coordinate defensive strategies. Nolan analyzed systems and communication networks to anticipate sabotage attempts. Jonah led rescue teams and trained staff in rapid evacuation techniques. The humans moved with calm determination, ready to face the largest threat the palace had yet encountered. When the rebel fleets arrived, the humans were prepared. The palace defenses had been fortified, traps set, and strategies planned for every possible scenario. The battle was swift and intense. The rebels underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and coordinate with the Karun defenders. Elias directed counterattacks with precision. He coordinated units that included both human volunteers and Karun soldiers, moving swiftly and striking at weak points. Nalan ensured that communication channels remained open and that the palace's defensive systems operated at maximum efficiency. Jonah led small teams to rescue civilians trapped in the chaos, moving through danger with remarkable calm and accuracy. The princesses were not bystanders. Celira fought alongside Elias, learning to move with him in ways she had never imagined. Vinci coordinated with Nalan to manage engineering crises during the battle. Koronix followed Jonah, assisting him in moving injured civilians and ensuring their safety. Together, humans and princesses demonstrated a level of coordination and courage that stunned the palace and the enemy. By the end of the engagement, the rebel fleets had retreated, their plans shattered. The humans had not only survived, they had led the palace to victory. The nobles who had doubted them were forced to acknowledge their skill, courage, and loyalty. King Vaelthar observed the aftermath with quiet satisfaction. His daughters had faced the rebellion not with fear, but with partnership alongside the humans. The palace had endured, and the humans had proven that strength could take many forms. The princesses, now deeply aware of the humans' capabilities, could no longer view them as mere outsiders. Cilira recognized Elias not only as a protector, but as a partner. Vinci saw Nalan as someone whose mind complemented her curiosity and intellect. Coronix felt a bond with Jonah built on trust and admiration. The rebellion had been the ultimate test, and humans had passed with distinction. The palace, once rigid and divided, had become a place of cooperation and respect, bridging cultures that had once seemed impossible to unite. As night fell over the capital, the princesses met in a private chamber to reflect. "I underestimated them," Cilira admitted. "I thought humans were weak, but they are stronger than most Karun warriors I know," Vinci nodded. "They act with intelligence and care, they inspire loyalty, and they protect without arrogance." Coronix added softly, "I was afraid at first, but now I trust Jonah completely. He teaches me to be brave in ways I never knew existed." The human presence in the palace had done more than protect it. They had begun to change it. The Karun Empire, long bound by tradition and fear, had glimpsed a new kind of strength. Courage, intelligence, and loyalty combined in a way that no amount of scale, armor, or weaponry could match. King Vaelthar's decree, once mocked and feared, was proving its wisdom. The humans were not just surviving, they were transforming the empire from within. And the princesses, once skeptical and hesitant, were beginning to understand that their future and the future of the Karun Empire might depend not on tradition, but on these outsiders who had arrived uninvited and yet had already changed everything. The stage was set for the final transformation, where humans and Karun would face challenges not yet imagined, alliances would be solidified, and the unexpected outcome of the king's decree would begin to reshape the galaxy itself. The palace was quiet in the early hours of the morning, but the calm was only a thin veil over tension. Word had spread of the rebellion's defeat, yet whispers of dissent lingered in the corridors. Some nobles still questioned the humans, unwilling to accept the undeniable truth. The king's decree had brought strength the empire had never known. King Vaelthar sat in his throne room, his scaled face reflecting the faint purple light of the dawn. His daughters stood near him, each watching the palace stir with a mixture of pride and caution. Cilira, who had once resented Elias, now looked at him with respect that bordered on admiration. Vinci had developed a fondness for Nalan's calm intelligence, and Coronix no longer feared Jonah, seeing in him a quiet strength that reassured her in ways she had never known. The humans had become more than allies, they had become part of the palace. Guards, servants, and even some nobles had begun to see their worth. Still, King Vaelthar knew that the true test was not in surviving a rebellion, but in showing the empire that cooperation with humans could bring lasting change. That test came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports revealed a coalition of alien species, long rivals of the Karun Empire, had noticed the internal unrest. They saw the empire as weakened by the king's decree and began assembling fleets to attack. The humans, already respected by the princesses and loyal palace guards, were now the first line of defense in what could become a war threatening the very capital. Elias immediately organized the palace defenses. He moved swiftly, pairing Karun warriors with human volunteers in units that could act independently or together. "We cannot fight as separate forces," he told Cilira as they inspected the palace walls. "We must act as one. Trust in your people, trust in your allies, and most of all, trust each other." Cilira nodded, understanding that leadership was not just about orders, but about coordination, adaptation, and confidence in those around her. She had never thought she would stand beside a human in planning the defense of the capital, yet here she was, feeling a bond that went beyond obedience. Nalan worked tirelessly to stabilize the communication networks, ensuring that every sector of the palace could send and receive orders instantly. He modified the energy shields to cover more areas, allowing defenders to move safely across corridors under attack. Vinci observed and assisted, learning quickly how to merge Karun technology with human ingenuity. Jonah led rescue teams across the palace grounds, teaching staff how to evacuate civilians efficiently in the event of an attack. Koronix stayed close, watching and assisting him. She had learned to act quickly, observe dangers before they appeared, and protect the vulnerable. In a few short weeks, she had grown from timid princess to someone capable of thinking and acting decisively. When the enemy fleets appeared on the horizon, the humans were ready. They moved with calculated speed, organizing defenses in ways that shocked Karun observers. They combined the Empire's technology with human strategies learned from past wars, coordinating attacks and rescues simultaneously. The first wave of enemy ships fired upon the palace's outer shields. Energy rippled and flashed, but the humans' preparation held. Ilias directed the palace's own fleet to intercept the attackers, using a combination of tactics that no Karun commander had attempted before. They moved unpredictably, striking and retreating, forcing the enemy to waste energy and miscalculate their next move. Inside the palace, Nalan's modifications kept the shields and communications stable. Alarms sounded, but he had already rerouted signals to prevent panic. Jonah moved among trapped civilians, leading them to safety, while also protecting sections that were vulnerable to attack. The princesses, fully engaged, followed the humans' lead, assisting guards and staff in maintaining order and safety. Silira fought alongside Ilias during a minor breach in the outer wall. The enemy had attempted a direct strike, expecting fear and chaos to spread. Instead, Silira and Ilias coordinated a small team of guards, countering the attackers with precision. She had never realized how humans could combine strategy with intuition, yet she now saw it in action. They moved together almost instinctively, each action complementing the other. Vinci and Nalan worked in the control center, monitoring energy outputs and sending real-time updates to defensive units. Vinci realized that she had underestimated human problem-solving. Nalan did not rely solely on rules or protocol. He adapted constantly, thinking several steps ahead, anticipating problems before they occurred. Koronix shadowed Jonah as he evacuated injured staff from a damaged wing. She had learned to move without hesitation, trusting her instincts and his guidance. When a small group of enemy drones broke through, she and Jonah acted instantly, using both Karun weapons and improvised tools to disable the threat without unnecessary harm. The battle raged for hours. Enemy forces were relentless, but the humans' combination of courage, strategy, and adaptability gave the defenders the edge. The Karun soldiers, inspired by the humans' calm determination, fought with renewed vigor. Civilians were protected. The palace remained intact. By the end of the engagement, the enemy fleets had retreated, beaten by tactics they had never expected from humans or Karun working together. The aftermath was remarkable. The palace staff celebrated, but more importantly, the nobles had no choice but to acknowledge the humans' contribution. The princesses, standing together with Ilias, Nalan, and Jonah, realized that their father's decree had achieved something extraordinary. Humans had not only survived in the palace, they had changed it, and the Empire had seen the proof in action. King Vaelthar addressed the court that evening. His voice was calm, yet carried weight. "We have faced rebellion within our walls and attack from without. The humans have proven their worth beyond question. They have not come to conquer or humiliate us. They have acted with courage, intelligence, and loyalty. These are the qualities that will guide the Karun Empire into a stronger future." The court fell silent. Even the most skeptical nobles could not deny the evidence before them. Humans had saved the capital. Humans had coordinated defenses and protected the people. Humans had inspired the princesses and palace staff. The king's decree, once mocked, now appeared visionary. Silira approached Ilias privately. "I thought humans were weak," she said quietly. "I was wrong. You have shown me strength I have never seen before, strength that does not come from fear or dominance." Ilias met her gaze. "Strength comes in many forms. Humans survive by protecting each other and adapting. That is what I have done here, and that is what I will continue to do." Vinci spoke to Nalan, her admiration evident. "You do not just act, you think ahead. You solve problems without hesitation. I have learned more from you in days than I have in years of study. Nolan smiled faintly. We learn from each other. That is how progress is made. Koronix stood beside Jonah, watching the city below. I was afraid at first, she admitted softly. But you taught me that courage is quiet and careful, yet unbreakable. Jonah nodded. Trust yourself and trust those who stand beside you. That is all anyone can do. In the following weeks, the humans continued to work alongside the princesses, the palace staff, and the Karun soldiers. They repaired damage from the battles, strengthened defenses, and shared knowledge that improved both strategy and everyday life in the empire. The princesses had grown in confidence, learning from the humans' example and applying it to leadership and decision-making. The nobles, once resistant, began to accept the new reality. Some remained skeptical, but most realized that humans brought value the empire had never known. Their presence had strengthened the palace, protected the people, and united the defenders in ways that tradition alone could not achieve. At a formal ceremony, King Vaelthar declared that the marriages would proceed not as a matter of decree alone, but with the genuine respect and consent of the princesses. The humans were honored not only for surviving in the palace, but for proving that their loyalty and courage were equal to any Karun warrior. Celira chose Elias, trusting him not just as a human outsider, but as a partner and protector. Vinci selected Nalan, recognizing his intelligence, patience, and steady guidance. Koronix accepted Jonah, understanding that his quiet strength and careful courage complemented her own growth. The unions were celebrated across the empire. Other species watched with disbelief as the Karun Empire, once rigid and fearful of outsiders, embraced humans in its highest circles. The king's decree had seemed shocking at first, but it had transformed the empire, proving that strength came not from fear, tradition, or dominance alone, but from courage, intelligence, and loyalty, the very qualities humans had demonstrated again and again. In the years that followed, the Karun Empire became a center of innovation, cooperation, and resilience. Humans and Karun worked together to expand knowledge, improve defenses, and protect weaker systems from harm. The princesses ruled alongside their human partners, combining wisdom, compassion, and strategy to strengthen the empire. The galaxy, once doubtful of humans, began to take notice. Other species realized that humans were not fragile, unpredictable, or weak. They had survived trials that even the mightiest aliens could not. They had proven their worth not through conquest, but through courage, loyalty, and the ability to inspire others. And the king, observing his daughters and their human partners, smiled quietly. What had once seemed impossible, the marriage of his daughters to humans, had become a source of strength, stability, and hope for the entire empire. The humans had arrived as outsiders, underestimated and overlooked. They had faced suspicion, rebellion, and even war. Yet through every trial, they had remained steadfast, proving that humanity's greatest power was not weapons, technology, or size, but the courage to act, the intelligence to adapt, and the loyalty to stand beside others when it mattered most. The Karun Empire, once proud and rigid, had been transformed. The princesses, now queens in their own right, had found partners who complemented and strengthened them. And the galaxy, witnessing this remarkable union, understood that humans were a force not to be underestimated, a species capable of inspiring greatness, loyalty, and unexpected triumph. The king's decree, once shocking and controversial, had become legend. It was remembered not for daring to challenge tradition, but for proving that strength and greatness could come from the most unexpected places. And as the sun set over the capital, casting long shadows across the spires of the palace, the humans and princesses stood together, looking out at a galaxy that had never believed in them, yet now had no choice but to respect the incredible power of humanity. The empire was safe, the people were inspired, and the humans, once outsiders, had become the heart of a new era. What no one expected had come to pass. Humans had not only survived the Karun Empire, they had changed it forever.